So because we're in between holy days, let's talk about them. So we celebrated Pesach, Passover. So on Passover, the first one, the lamb was slaughtered, the blood was put over the doorposts, right, for going out of Egypt. On the second one, our Passover lamb celebrated the feast with his disciples, became our Passover lamb at the appointed time, hung on a cross, went dark, and then they celebrated the Feast of Unleavened Bread that night, okay, which they still call Passover. They have like two dinners, just like this, and they're basically the same. They go through two seders. Then after that, so when he died on Passover. He was in the grave for unleavened bread. He rested over Shabbat, and he rose on the first day, which the evening and the morning of the first day, right? So when it says the first day of the week, it didn't have to be a Sunday morning, did it? No, it was still dark. So it was a Saturday night. Yeah, okay. Which is, let's go there. Okay, let's go there. I'm going to read out of the Holy Day Siddur, okay? So, you know, the Leviticus 23 book, this one's different. So out of Leviticus 23, remember there are holy days that God commanded. Are they Jewish? Are they Jewish days? No. But the Jewish people have been the ones that have been faithful to observe them. So everybody calls them the Jewish holidays. No, they're God's. They're in his book. He commanded them. They're Jewish people are just the ones that have been faithful enough to observe them. So I'm going to read a little bit out of the Pesach so that it gives you, it's going to go over Passover, unleavened bread, and first fruits. Okay? They're three because they go boom, boom, boom. When Yeshua died, it was Passover, unleavened bread, Shabbat, first fruits. Okay? In that order. In that many days. It doesn't always happen that way because of the calendar. Okay? So because of the calendar, the days are not always the same days of the week. Okay. So let me go over. So when we get to first fruits, I'll stop when I get there. If it doesn't explain it, I'll explain it. All right. Exodus 12 in the earlier chapters tell the story of Pesach, right? If you read Exodus 1 through 15, you have the Exodus story, okay? All of it, even 2 months after the fact, but you get the full picture, okay? You get the full picture of what transpired the very first Passover, the very first Exodus. 9 plagues had not convinced the Pharaoh of Egypt to release the Jewish people. God had one final plague in mind. In order to be protected from this plague, each family had to kill a lamb and apply its blood to the door of their home. And basically, in my estimation, made a chet, right? A chet. And if you add a yod to it, God to it, you've got chai, life, right? Life is in the blood. Okay. When the angel of destruction or death passed through Egypt, he passed over the homes with blood on the door. Passed them right on by, right? Leviticus 23, 4 through 5 commands this festival to be observed in the first month of the Jewish year, right? God said this will be the first month of the year for you. This will be the first of the year for you. So in September, when they celebrate Rosh Hashanah, head of the year, which is really Yom Torah, Day of Trumpets in Scripture, we think of it like we have different years, right? We have different beginnings. We have a school year that starts in August now. It used to be September. We have a fiscal year starts in October. We have a tax year that's April. We have, New Year that starts at midnight. Lord, I like the Jewish way. Sundown. Happy New Year. Good night.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, seriously, right? Nothing good happens in the middle of the night. Unless you're on your knees in prayer, right? So that's the different. That's the only way I can say man, even Jewish man decided, oh, September is going to be Rosh Hashanah. That's the first of the year. And that's when they start their calendar. That's when the new year date starts. But God said here, okay? And isn't it interesting? Spring, right? New life. That should be new life. That should be the new year. Okay. So the calendar is agricultural in nature because his covenant is with the people and the land, not just the people. His covenant is with the people and the land. Okay. Okay, and there's an association of Pesach with the unleavened bread, right? Feast of unleavened bread, because matzah is to be eaten for 7 days, right? In your home, no yeast, no leaven. Traditionally, Pesach is observed. Much has been since before Yeshua. I kind of touched on that in Passover. The major exceptions include the presence of the lamb bone replacing eating an actual lamb, right? Okay. And the addition of what, remember I told you, was the afikomen, which is a Greek term. And the afikomen can be traced back to 1st century temple, okay, at the time of Yeshua. So isn't that interesting? But then the Jewish people will tell you, the Jewish sages will tell you, oh, we don't know exactly where it came from. But some will tell you, well, the best account of it we can find is in the New Testament, the Christians' New Testament, called, Corinthians, when Paul talks about, okay? All right, so you have a good picture there. So an incident from the time of the Second Temple highlights the messianic significance of Pesach. At that time, people traveled great distances to observe the holiday in Jerusalem. That's one of the 3 that you're commanded to go, right? There, the priest would indicate an appropriate lamb. So people would go up to the Temple Mount, and there were lambs, which, by the way, should not be on the Temple Mount at that time. Remember, he flipped tables, and okay, that's why. But they would go, and at the temple, probably outside the temple should be, where they would pick lambs, because they didn't necessarily want to bring a lamb if they came from the Galilee. You don't want something to happen to the lamb before you get to Jerusalem. So there were special lambs that were raised for Pesach and for sacrifices on the mount. And so the people would be looking for a lamb, and there would be a priest would indicate the appropriate lamb by pointing to the animal and saying, "Behold the lamb." Recognition. Ding, 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 right? Behold the lamb. So you're looking for one, behold the lamb. In other words, that one's for you. Okay? But then we get John the Baptizer. And what does he say? Behold the lamb. Takes away what?
The sin.
Sin. Behold the lamb that takes away the sin of the world. Was that a statement? You bet it was. That was a statement. That was a statement. Okay? He thus indicated that Yeshua's forthcoming sacrificial death related to the meaning of Pesach. Right? And later Paul also says, Yeshua, our Passover, is sacrificed for us. Okay? Yeshua the Messiah acted as God's Passover lamb for us. He died that we might live. But before he died, he took one of the cups of wine. And what did he say? This is my... Wow. He also, after the dinner, took a piece of bread and said what? This is my body. Wow. This would remind us and his followers of the blood of the Passover lamb was applied to the doorposts and that the bread was hidden. And it's funny because he took the one after the meal, which we know is the what? The afikomen. Mm-hmm. The one that was hidden away, but the one... Afikomen, if you go to a Greek root word, means he has come or has come. Okay. And, when they looked in the tomb and the clothing was folded, he's coming. Mm-hmm. He's coming back. He's coming, right? Mm-hmm. Okay. He's our Afikomen. Wow. Interesting, using Jewish tradition, scripture, and history, and you can see a picture, right? Okay. Leviticus 12:6-8 describes a festival of unleavened bread, which is closely connected to Pesach. Unleavened bread, matzot, may very well picture pure bread in that it has no yeast-like agents, so it is uncontaminated. He was uncontaminated by sin, and yet became sin. The one who did not sin bore our sin. Okay? For this reason, leaven frequently represents evil, right? And when you read in Scripture, and especially in New Testament, you read about leaven, and it talks about it means sin. This feast became part of the Passover week observance because of the command to eat matzah for 7 days. So today, when people say, "Oh, I celebrate Pesach," they mean Passover and Feast of Unleavened Bread. They lump it together in a 7 days. It's really 8 total. Because you've got Passover and then you've got 7 days of unleavened bread. When Yeshua ate his Passover meal, his last one, he took the matzot, broke it as we do today, and he said, "This is my body, which would be given as a sacrifice." Hence the significance of a pure or unleavened bread. According to Leviticus 23, 9 through 14, the ceremony of first fruits occurs immediately after Pesach. The very first part of the harvest is weighed before God, a symbolic way of presenting it to God to be accepted for us. Traditionally, the observance associates this ceremony with Passover week. So on the first fruits, it says, if you read it correctly and you go and you look at the Hebrew roots of it, it says on the day after the Shabbat. It means the weekly Shabbat. So it's the Shabbat after Passover, the weekly Shabbat after Passover. Today, most of the world and most of the Jewish people start counting after the Feast of Unleavened Bread, counting it as a Shabbat, because all of God's holy days in Leviticus 23 are Shabbats. Okay, so there's confusion as to how they do that. All right, that's why the calendar is going to say something different than what I say. All right, so Passover was Monday, unleavened bread was Tuesday. So the counting of the Omer, the first fruits, would have been quote unquote Wednesday. That would have been the first waving, and then they start counting what's called counting of the Omer, which is they count 50 days, which is what we come up to as Pentecost. But if you look at it scripturally, it's the day after the Shabbat after Passover. Passover happened day after today, which means tomorrow will be first fruits. It will always be the first day of the week. Therefore, he will always, quote unquote, the risen Pentecost, Shavuot will always be the first day of the week, according to Scripture. But now, are our calendars correct? No. Even the Jewish one? Even the Jewish one. So we do the best that we can do. So we conform and we try to have unity, because shouldn't we have unity? Yeah. So I know there's other movements out there that there's 3 different calendars out there of people that observe different things, okay? So will I follow counting the Omer with the Jewish people? Yeah, I will. And will I tell them Hag Sameach on the day that they think is first fruits? I will. But I will also honor what I'm counting correctly and honor that. But are either one of us correct? Not necessarily so, okay? When Messiah comes, when the King comes, don't you think he's going to set us straight? And he's going to look at the intent of the heart. Is there any way for me to 100% know which? No, there is not. Okay? And anyone that knows of these things will tell you the same thing. Okay? There is no 100% sure way to know, because of all the different times that they were taken into bondage. Did they keep track of Shabbat, 7th day? Oh yeah, that they know. That was easy to do. Okay? That is keeping track of Shabbat, 7 days, and weekly, but somehow in the cycles and the feasts and the festivals, they're doing the best they can, okay? Because sometimes you add an extra month. So are we adding the extra month in the right year? Maybe we're not. Maybe we missed it. Maybe we should have added the extra month last year, not this year. So our calendar would be off. Does that make sense? Okay, because the Jewish calendar, God's biblical calendar is lunar. So that's like 28 and a half days or something, okay? So 28 and a third days. Whereas our calendars are not. We're solar, okay? And we even have leap years where we add a day, right? Okay. So the interesting part about Yom Torah, Rosh Hashanah, feast of, or Day of Trumpets, is that's the only holy day that God said would be on the first day of the month. And the only way you knew it was the first day of the month was probably a day after, because you had to see the moon, the new moon. And the new moon isn't full, it's nothing. It's a little sliver. And so if there was a cloud or something, you could miss it. And it can happen in the middle of the day. It doesn't necessarily happen. And new moon doesn't necessarily happen at night. It might be during the daytime, and you wouldn't see it. Okay? So no man knows the day or the hour, but the King is coming. But the King is coming, and you can know the seasons. You can know the times. Timing, but not the day and the hour. And that is why. So, Maranatha, right?